Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wavelengths, an Amphenol Broadband Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B. Thanks again for joining us, folks, on another episode of the show as we continue to explore the trends, the technologies, and the tectonic plate shifting themes and topics that are shaping the world of broadband and the larger telecom industry. Make sure that you're heading to our website, amphenolbroadband.com. Again, that's amphenolbroadband.com for previous episodes of our podcast, Wavelengths, but also more resources on our solutions and services, but of course, more thought leadership as well, including episodes of the podcast, but also videos, white papers, blogs, thought leadership, you name it. All right, folks, let's jump into the conversation. We've got a lot to unpack today, per usual. Today's episode is going to feel a little familiar. It's actually going to be kind of continuing our tradition on this show of sitting down with industry experts to get their perspectives on how broadband innovations, and specifically fiber, are supporting the connectivity technologies and the networks of today and tomorrow. So with today's chat, we're going to be honing in a little more specifically on the 5G layer through a 5G lens, understanding some of the downstream impacts on the development of IoT deployments, the adoption of IoT technology, and smart city use cases, but then really try to understand why the future of all of those technologies is one that is driven by fiber and what role does fiber play, right? So we're going to get a pulse check on how these edge tech market segments, again, 5G, IoT, and smart cities are all developing today, why these developments are so critical, how they're taking shape, and again, unpack the role that fiber is playing in facilitating the development of these market segments. So let's get into the conversation today with our guest. I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Ritesh Mukherjee. He's SVP and General Manager of Products at 5G networking leader Inseego. So he and his team at Inseego are developing 5G and intelligent IoT device-to-cloud solutions. Recently, they launched SD Edge, which was specifically in response to an enterprise demand for secure digital transformation experiences that are being driven by adoptions and advancements in 5G and IoT. So I'm looking forward to getting this lens today. Ritesh, great to have you on. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks, Daniel, for having me on the show. I'm excited to talk about fiber and 5G and how, they mingle together to provide the best experience for customers and enterprises.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate your lens again on the show. Just so our audience understands the unique perspectives you're bringing to the table and how those are informed by your experience, but also Inseego's work, give us that quick elevator pitch, right? What is that lens that you're bringing to the conversation today?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Inseego, we provide intelligent device-to-cloud solutions. And what that means is we provide the last mile through wireless or 5G connectivity. So we extend the 5G network edge, enable broader coverage with multi-gigabyte speeds, low latency, and so on. Also our products are deployed and trusted by millions of users, our hotspots, modems, routers, and so on. Fiber is obviously essential for enabling this connectivity. I mean, the last mile, yes, which is tough to do with fiber. And fiber is one of those tools. You can do fiber to the home, fiber to the curb, fiber to here. But ultimately, it's difficult to do that last mile. Wireless provides a great solution for that. But having said that, once you have that first hop to the tower, you are connected over fiber. So fiber is the backbone for many infrastructures, including the 5G infrastructure. There's no single wireless connection from me to Amazon or me to Google or Gmail or anything like that. It ultimately is from me to the tower, which is then connected via fiber. So we like the idea of having fiber and to enable our 5G connectivity, but we also like to obviously think that the last mile is difficult to do with fiber, and to pull fiber to every home is difficult. And so that's where this 5G connectivity comes in. And together, 5G and fiber can together provide that solution which we need to connect all these homes and enterprises and so on.
And I think you bring up a good point there that we will expand on a little more naturally in the discussion, but I just want to highlight it that in all these discussions I have with our telecom pros, it's become more and more and more clear that when we have these discussions about the role of, let's say expansion of rural broadband or development of 5G infrastructure, or we look at recent kind of proprietary IoT networks like Amazon Sidewalk being launched, a lot of times the framework of those launches is around, this is why this is the best X, Y, and Z technology for this use case. What we're seeing, what you just described, and what we'll break down is that it's the ecosystem that really is the most important, and that it's all about, as these technologies develop, how are they playing their role better in that ecosystem to be supported by fiber, let's say, or to support wireless connectivity, or to help facilitate connections between X and Y. That sort of intermingled weight and desire to see competing but really complementary technologies develop. That's really the takeaway that I'm excited to lean on today. Would you agree, as we get into the discussion, that as we see these technologies develop, really we should be looking at their role in that larger ecosystem? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, 5G and fiber are better together. Fiber provides the backhaul for all 5G deployments. I mean, like I said, there's no ultimate single wireless link from us to Amazon or to Google or to cloud or to anything else. I mean, it has to ultimately go fiber. And fiber is fast and speed is better in a vacuum, in the sense without any other considerations. However, all applications we use in our homes obviously do not demand that high speeds which fiber provides. This means only investing in fiber is obviously not the only solution. A combination of FWA, fixed wireless access, fiber, even DOCSIS, or any of the existing technologies as well, an evolution of that provides the best solution. And I completely agree with what you said, that we are going to look at it as a holistic picture of what the ecosystem needs. And this is one tool in our toolbox, 5G or fixed wireless access, or 5G or fiber. They're all one tool in the toolbox, and we're going to use all of them to make sure that we have the best possible experience.
So with that, let's get into some recent developments in 5G. Obviously at Inseego, y'all are at the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of seeing 5G deployed in practice and understanding how do we get this developing in real time. What are you seeing right now in the industry? Just some recent developments that are most critical in the underlying 5G technology. And then I'll ask you some questions about how that's manifesting kind of per industry.
Sure. If you look at it, 5G, it provides high speeds because of, better data rates and so on, and improved connectivity and all this. Two of the leading operators in the US today have more than 5 million, fixed wireless access connections today. There's about a little bit north of 100 million, I would say, fixed wireless access connections worldwide. And that number is continuously going up. This means about 20% of all broadband connections at some point will be around FWA. So obviously the biggest use case for 5G has been fixed wireless access, providing these homes with connectivity, especially in rural areas and even in urban areas where it's difficult to pull fiber or there's older infrastructure. Fixed wireless access is a quick way to do that. We are seeing the new use cases, or the promise of use cases which were there with 5G now coming into picture. Like they're being used for AR, VR, and for connectivity to stadiums and connectivity in different use cases. In smart cities, many of the lampposts in some of these newer cities and newer infrastructures are connected by 5G. So we are seeing that happen. But still, I would say about the biggest growth for 5G deployments has been in fixed wireless access, which is connecting basically users in homes with access. The other thing to know is that, it does help solve the digital divide. Recent reports show that about 22% of US and roughly, I would say 40% of households worldwide are on the wrong side of the digital divide, with no high broadband speeds. And of course, that's because of various reasons, economic reasons, affordability, last mile challenges, ability to pull fiber, and so on. So there we have seen a lot of deployment of using 5G solutions or 5G hotspots or 5G mobile routers being given out so that people can have connectivity. It provides a good way to provide quickly and effortlessly connect these families who are far off or don't have good connectivity. So those are the things we are seeing now. For us, I would say the biggest use case has been fixed wireless access. Maybe even 60 to 70% of our entire deployments are mainly fixed wireless access. The remaining, I would say, are for connecting private networks, manufacturing, industries, smart cities. They would be the next ones which are coming up. We have not yet seen so much of deployments for autonomous vehicles and cars and so on. There is, of course, wireless connectivity for for getting traffic updates and music in the car and so on, but not so much being used for autonomous driving or anything like that today. We haven't seen so much of that. So that's what I would say the main deployments have been. We are seeing also 5G being used for connecting um, AR, VR headsets and so on. I mean, many of these things only make sense if you're not, plugged to a cable next to the Ethernet cable or your phone. It only makes sense if you can be mobile and if you can use them. So we are seeing use cases like that, but it's still in infancy.
I also want to make sure we intersect, again, IoT use cases and smart city development. These are obviously all kind of separate phenomena, right? IoT, it doesn't all happen on 5G. Smart cities are developing without 5G, but 5G's advancement is very much sort of the vision for the next phase of a lot of these deployments. When we're talking, let's say municipal wide IoT, which at that point becomes smart cities, something reliable like 5G supported by fiber infrastructure is going to be key. So in that sense, it's useful to think of these as kind of downstream from advancements in fiber and 5G. I'm curious how you see, development of IoT devices, the advancement of these devices, further deployment of them, and then that kind of evolution of IoT ecosystems into smart cities is intersecting with advancements in 5G and fiber tech and deployment, especially because a lot of these smart city deployments that are imagined have a lot of mission critical functions to them. They're either smart cities for daily functioning of a downtown, let's say. They're smart cities for wayfinding in emergency situations. They're smart cities in a healthcare setting, right? And so these aren't kind of one-off, fun, quirky deployments. They are mission critical and bake into the quality of life for people living in those regions. So with that as context, what are you seeing as the important intersections between these market segments? And why does it matter to kind of study the downstream effects on IoT and smart cities from where 5G and fiber are developing and advancing?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at IoT connections, people talk about using 5G for IoT connections and of course fiber as well. One of the challenges with IoT is obviously the cost of the device. I mean, you have all these Philips Hue devices at home,
Got
which are
lots of
connected.
those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure. And they work great. I mean, they're connected to the Wi-Fi in your house. You can give voice commands, you can change colors, turn them on and off. But the main issue is they are not connected to 5G directly. And that's because the cost of the modem. The cost of the modem is 5G modem would make the cost of all these IoT devices much more expensive. Like today, they're around $10 to $20. These bulbs on the high end, on the lower end, they could be even cheaper. But if I put a 5G modem in each one of them, they would become $200, and no one would use them. The same issue applies to the IoT devices. If I had IoT devices all over the city, or for monitoring, sensors and so on in restaurants and houses, in buildings, in manufacturing and so on, I can't have direct connectivity to the 5G network from these devices, mainly because it would increase the cost of those devices significantly. For one or two devices, I can do that. I could pay more, But if there's hundreds and hundreds of devices of IoT sensors I got to deploy, then obviously increasing the cost of each device makes no sense. And what we need then is, of course, a connectivity from there to the backhaul, in the sense you need, maybe you can have those connected over Wi-Fi, like in the case of the bulbs, and they connected to, let's say, a 5G CPE, which can then do the backhaul, or they're connected to fiber. To a CPE which is connected to your fiber network, like to an ONT, which is doing a Wi-Fi signal, and so on. The other option is we could have a large private network in manufacturing. Like now you have these manufacturing plants which are deploying big private networks where you're connected with low cost modems and so on to the CBRS network, and that is forming the network around it, and then you can backhaul again that data as you need. One of the things we notice is 5G for IoT makes sense till the time you think of it, like I said, as the backhaul. The time you think of it as that's going to be the connection to the end, well, that only makes sense in some real mission critical infrastructure where you want to have the modem built into the IoT device as well. Otherwise, you need to have some sort of way to reach the 5G backhaul or a fiber backhaul, and you should be thinking of it using all of these solutions together, which is why our products, if you look at them, they all come inbuilt with Wi-Fi 6 or 6E today. That's because we understand that the last mile after even the 5G CPE will connect to devices which are IoT devices and so on, which will be mainly over Wi-Fi today. We would love it if all our laptops had, you could plug in a SIM card and just have connectivity directly, but then the cost of each laptop would increase by $200 or so, and that makes it a little cost prohibitive. So that's where it makes sense to just rely on Wi-Fi at the end in your homes and in manufacturing and in facilities to connect it to the Wi-Fi network and then use it as a backhaul. This does bring, of course, security as a challenge. But there are solutions available for providing security over the Wi-Fi network, separating your home Wi-Fi from your corporate Wi-Fi and so on. It was a long-winded answer, but I hope I give you some context on what we think of, how we think of fiber and 5G in relation to IoT. We want them to the backhaul but not directly to the IoT device.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're seeing play out in practice, right? I think some of the best examples are that a lot of the most accessible IoT networks that consumers now have access to, for example, Amazon Sidewalk, that is sort of its own proprietary IoT network. It is probably supported by fiber and 5G, but it's not consumers connecting their string of Amazon devices to a 5G connection or to a fiber line or something, right? It's just taking advantage of that strong foundation and then having a sort of more short range but still high power IoT connection for the day-to-day use, right? Which then brings me to my last point, which is getting your thoughts on this relationship between wired and wireless links for homes, but I think more importantly for enterprises, right? Because when we think about the use cases for 5G, for IoT, and smart cities in practice, a lot of them are mission critical, like we've broken down, right? And so having redundancy in links, whether they are wireless, whether they are wired, is key. Should one go down, you're not suddenly, oops, I guess we don't have a network anymore. You have some redundancy in those connections. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on maybe advice or strategy for how enterprises should approach embracing wired links, wireless links, and developing their own foundational infrastructure to future-proof for some of these digital transformations that are still on the horizon.
Absolutely. I mean, the best, like I said, the best redundancy is provided when you have wired and wireless connections working in tandem. And the reason for that is the last mile, if you have fiber, That's great. You have good connectivity and it's future proof, but fiber cuts do happen. Things do go wrong. You have outages. And when that happens, you want to have a wireless connectivity. Um, the thing to note is many people think that, why don't I just get two wired connections? That would be great if they are from different, what do you say, mediums being provided, in the sense of, remember that fiber paths are similar, in the sense it's not like one ISP digs one side of the road and the other ISP digs the other side of the road. No, they're all on the same side of the road. And so when a fiber cut happens, it can cut both the fibers. It's actually a common problem. In fact, in my previous role, I was at Reliance Geo, and we heard the National Stock Exchange of India had an outage. Um, and that reason was they had multiple fiber connections from multiple providers, but both of them were cut. So I mean, that does happen. You need to have redundancy in connections, and the best redundancy is wireless and wired. Now we are even telling our retail enterprises and so on, that you could have one of our outdoor units connected to a far off tower, and the indoor unit connected to a nearby tower, wireless tower, so that even if that tower went down, or had some issues in connectivity, or was congested for some reason, even in the wireless links, you would get redundancy with connection to multiple towers, and then from there using fiber as the backhaul. The best solution is obviously to have fiber and 5G as the last mile, or DOCSIS, or whatever you have as a wired, and 5G as the last mile, and then go over the fiber network from the cell tower or from the curb and so on. So a combination of those. We always tell enterprises, think of redundancy for combination of both, and don't worry so much about redundancy of end devices. People also tell us, like, hey, should we have two of your units? What if one of your unit fails? Yeah, but I mean, do you have them connected to different power supplies? No. So what if the power supply fails? You're not really creating redundancy by doing that. What you want is redundancy in the links. And the devices themselves, they have very high mean time between failures. So or very low mean time between failures. They hardly fail. They're good for years and years. So don't worry about that part. Think of the connectivity, and think of how you're going to get redundancy in terms of connections. And the best way to do that is to have wired and wireless work in tandem.
And I think that's a good point too, to apply to general digital transformation investment. There's so many competing areas of investment that are drawing enterprises' attention. And I think knowing where to place those funds, motivated by kind of what you're saying here, right? Which is these investments should go towards areas where you're going to have the most guaranteed return on your investment. Naturally, that's always a motivating factor. But when we're talking redundancy, for example, if building redundancy on sort of the very end of that last mile means you have to invest in secondary power supply, a whole secondary run of devices, nodes, etc., that seems like, maybe down the line, go ahead, do that. Great. Redundancy is always great. But if you can invest instead in the links, in the infrastructure that helps to power your operations, your oversight, whatever it might be, your analytics, your cloud, your relationship to the cloud, all of that is probably more fundamental, because that's where we see more inconsistencies. Should a network go down, you have a backup network connection, or should one slow down, I know a lot of enterprises have, these links operating in tandem. So it's not one, and if it goes out, it's the other, but actually sort of simultaneously pulling from whichever one is up, or is faster, or better serves X or Y or Z purpose. Is that level of sort of granular relationship with wired versus wireless connections something that you're seeing enterprises deploy and get strategic about? what are you seeing on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing called backups anymore. I mean, there's no point in building a second connection and just not using it or just waiting to use it. I mean, if you had Ronaldo and Messi on the same team, you wouldn't use one at a time. You would let both of them go on the field and score as many goals as you can. So same thing, if you have wireless and wired connections, it's not like one is a backup of the other. No, you're using both of them active. But of course, you're going to load balance intelligently, maybe even combine the speeds intelligently, so that you can get the best out of both the scenarios. There is a tendency to think that wireless always will be the backup, mainly because wired is sort of, the cost is included, and wireless, I'm paying for data, which is true in many cases. But now the data caps are so high with all these operators providing connections. You don't need to really worry about not using the wireless connection and only using wired. You could also set your threshold. I mean, nowadays we can monitor thresholds and so on, that use this first, use this second, or load balance them 50-50, 70-30, whatever way you want. What we tell our users, especially the ones at home, remote work, or enterprises, is that your mission critical traffic, we give the best priority and we put it on the best possible network. The remaining, we backhaul over obviously the low cost or the cheapest possible solution. So if you want, you use the 5G network, let's say, only for your enterprise traffic, and the wired connection for everything else, like your fun traffic, like guest Wi-Fi, YouTube, Xbox, and so on traffic. Or you could say send everything over the wired network, and in times of congestion, move only the enterprise traffic to 5G, so that there has a clear path. You can do all sorts of these combinations now. Most of our devices, especially the SDH solutions, they are very intelligent to do all of these different things you want. But yeah, definitely you should be using both active, and utilizing the best possible scenario for your application, so that you can load balance and aggregate traffic over these links intelligently.
All right, Ritesh, I think on that note, we'll go ahead and end on an actionable note for our audience. Thank you again for your perspectives today, giving us your insight into recent developments in 5G, IoT, and smart city technology use cases, but then again, understanding the role fiber plays in supporting these real-time developments. As folks are familiar with on this podcast, these are trends that are developing in real time. That's why we have multiple conversations with multiple experts like yourself, Ritesh, at least once every few months to get another pulse check. So I imagine we're going to continue to see, new fiber deployment, new infrastructure, motivation, whether federal, funding or otherwise, 5G infrastructure continuing to develop in the US. And as we see this, we're going to keep posing these questions on the relationship between network technologies and how they can support the end point use cases of today and tomorrow. So, Ritesh, again, thank you so much for your insights. Folks, we've been chatting with Ritesh Mukherjee. He is, again, SVP and General Manager of Products at 5G networking leader Inseego. To learn more about Inseego, you can go to Inseego.com. And Ritesh, if folks want to learn a little bit more about some of the work you're doing or pick your brain a little bit, where should we point them?
Yeah, I mean, the website is obviously a good point. We have contacts. You can obviously come in and we can talk about it. You can hit me up on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I do monitor them sometimes. And so that's one way to reach me. Fiber and 5G are better together, and fiber forms the backhaul for all 5G. So that's the main thing to know. And Daniel, it was nice talking to you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I hope I'll be back soon again to talk more.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that next conversation. Ritesh Mukherjee, thank you again for your time.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
And thank you again, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of Wavelengths, an Amphenol Broadband Solutions podcast. If you like what you heard and saw today and you want previous episodes, or you want to make sure that you don't miss out on the next important conversation on the future of broadband and the larger telecom industry, make sure you're heading to our website, amphenolbroadband.com. And make sure that you're subscribing to Wavelengths on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast content. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wavelengths, an Amphenol Broadband Solutions podcast.